Where'd that come from? There's ghosts in here. I just got one question for you guys. Are y'all ready to rock? Yeah. Oh man, I thought everybody was going to be silent. I had this whole shtick worked out. Anyway, let's talk about usability testing. Now, I've written a lot of code that nobody uses. And that's kind of a weird thing to say, right? But I imagine I'm not the only guy here who can say that. Like a couple years ago, I was working for this company, this startup that did software for real estate agents. And, you know, overall, I think this project was technically successful. We had a good designer on board. It was pretty. The engineering team did well. We were delivering things on time, under budget. And we just had this one sort of big problem, and that's that nobody actually wanted to use the software. And after a while, it started to bug me because, well, I'm lazy, right? And I kind of pride myself on this. I don't like doing things that I don't have to do. And here I'd spent 2 years of my life working really hard to build something when I could have been playing Xbox. And it just really irked me that I missed such a great opportunity to slack off. So in this sort of like frame of mind, this agitated frame of mind, I started noticing just little things about the place, and that, like, I had never actually met one of these real estate agents. I didn't even know what these customers of ours looked like. It was pretty interesting because, and the development team we'd sort of asked about this. We'd asked to be able to shadow these users, to be able to go and see how they actually use the software. But, you know, there's always something more important. There was always a fire to be put out. There's always some new feature that, you know, this time it's just going to make everybody flock to the app. And yeah, so we just never sort of got around to doing it. And in the end, I think we wound up making an app that technically was nice. That was a nice app in and of itself, but that it just fundamentally wasn't connected with how these people actually did their work on a day-to-day basis. And from a careful reading of Slashdot and, you know, TechCrunch and all that, this seems to be the rule rather than the exception. People seem to be doing this all the time. And this is sort of on the top of my mind lately because I no longer work for that company. I work for myself now. I work for my own company. I'm a co-founder of Honey Badger. We monitor Ruby applications in production and send you alerts when bad things happen. And this is really important to me now because if people don't like using our app, if people don't like using our product, then I don't get paid. And that's kind of a deal breaker for me because, like, in addition to being lazy, I'm also greedy. And I want to be able to do things like eat, like take my wife to the movies occasionally. And that's good motivation for me. But what about you guys? I imagine we're all kind of in the same boat, right? I imagine all of our destinies are in some way tied to the success of a project or a group of projects or something like that. And at some point, people actually have to use this stuff we're building. People have to use it, and yeah, and if they don't wind up using it, if they're not able to use it, that really can affect the overall success of your project and, you know, your future income. Just, you know, a couple obvious examples, right? If your sign-up process sucks, you could be losing 10% of your users without even realizing it. I mean, if your app is just generally hard to use, if people don't like it, then you're going to lose customers because of that. And I just want to point out that if these were development issues, right? If your sign-up system, if your user system was throwing away 1 out of every 10 users that signed up, that would be a huge freaking deal. That's the kind of bug that you stay late to fix, right? But that's not a bug in the code. It's not a problem with the code. It's a problem with the design. And design can have bugs. I'm just going to let that bore bore itself into your eyeballs for a little bit longer. Yeah, the design can have bugs, and the bugs can have real consequences, just like code bugs can. But for some reason, we don't really treat them as seriously, or at least that's my experience. We tend not to treat them as seriously as bugs in the code. So I mean, why is this? As an industry, as programmers we're sort of obsessed with quality. We want to do everything perfectly, right? And while I imagine most of you guys wouldn't dream of shipping code that you hadn't tested, that you didn't know worked, we ship designs all the time that haven't been tested, that not a single user has actually seen. And I'm guilty of this as well. And so why do we do this? It can't be because we don't care, because people who don't care don't come to conferences. Why do we do this? I think it's just that we don't think there's a problem. I don't think we recognize that this is even an issue. Right? I can use my app. My app works fine. What's the big deal? And so things seem fine. And so we don't hesitate to ship designs that later can actually be proven are broken, that have problems, that make it hard for the users to do things. So, I don't know, this sort of leads you down this crazy spiral of like self-doubt, and this is just like, this morning is just like the bummer, all the uplifting talks are tomorrow. This leads you down this really weird path where you start to wonder, okay, is something wrong with me? Like, I can see problems in my code. I can stop those before they ship. Why can't I stop these problems with my design before they ship? Like, how come I have to just find out about them a month later when, you know, I see that revenues have dropped or whatever? Well, I was talking to a friend of mine. I was at a barbecue at my friend's house a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about this stuff. And I mentioned that I was going to be giving this talk, a talk about usability for developers. And she said, Starr, if I was going to give that talk, I would just have one slide, and on that slide it would say, you are not your users. And so I thought that was kind of interesting, so I made an infographic for you guys. Right? You're not your users, you're programmers. Like, has anybody here ever tried using Vim? I mean, I don't care if you use it on a regular basis. Has anybody tried using it? Like, do you know any non-programmers who have tried using Vim, who even know what Vim is? It's a great text editor. People have to edit text, right? See, the thing that makes us awesome, and the thing that makes us really kind of weird, is that we're able to, and willing, to take on enormous amounts of technical pain if, at the end of it all, we think we're going to be able to make a quadricopter deliver us a martini. And even when we can't do something that awesome, you know, even if there's no obvious payout, we do this stuff because it's fun, because it's just what we do. But just like that's, I think, sort of our greatest strength as programmers, I think that's also like our greatest weakness. It's sort of like Superman or something. Actually, I don't know anything about Superman, so never mind. Anyway, because we deal with this technical pain so often, we're so used to it, we kind of get immune to it. We kind of, I don't know, we just get used to it. And so it becomes easier for us to ship interfaces that we think are fine, that look fine to us, but that to anybody else just seem like gibberish. So, I know some of you guys are probably thinking that, you know, this is kind of a solved problem. Developers have this really bad reputation for making user interfaces. I mean, with Linux. We have this really bad reputation, but that's a known problem. It's solved. We have designers, man. That's what we pay these guys for. Well, I mean, your designer isn't really your user either, are they? Right? And I'm just going to go off on a rant for a second. I hate the word designer. I hate it because it's one of those words that means so many things that it doesn't mean anything at all. I mean, you have floral designers, you have architectural designers, you have battleship designers, and you have one word that means all those things. But the type of designer we most often deal with as developers is a graphic designer, a visual designer. Now these guys want to make stuff pretty, which is awesome because I like pretty things. But they don't know how your users are going to behave when they hit your application. I mean, maybe they pretend they do. Maybe they had a class about it. Maybe they've got really good instincts. But unless they're actually doing testing, unless they're actually interviewing users, they really don't know. They're just kind of guessing, just like you are, just like I am. Your client isn't your user. This is kind of hard for me to swallow personally because I was a freelancer for a long time. And one of the things I really prided myself on was being able to deliver a deliverable that made my client happy, right? That satisfied their requirements, was real, was in the confines of reality and all that. But I'm here to tell you, like, you can make a product that makes your client 100% happy, but is just a wretched, ungodly, unusable mess. I should know because I've done it. And in case you're wondering, it usually involves making the logo bigger. I'm just going to pause on all my ugliest slides. So your boss isn't your user. Your ops guy isn't your user. Only your user is your user. But Twitter doesn't count. Because people are going to tell you all sorts of things, right? People are going to tell you that your kerning sucks, that your font sucks, that your design is great, that your design is awful, that you need to implement features X, Y, and Z, and then they'll buy your product. And they might be right, you know? But there's a lot that people don't tell you. Like, for example, people aren't going to tell you that that form that they had to fill out made them feel dumb because they didn't use the terminology, or they didn't understand the terminology that you used. People aren't going to tell you that they just left your site after 5 minutes because they didn't know how the heck they were supposed to use it. These are the things people won't tell you, but really, these are the huge problems. This is the stuff we need to know the most. And this is where usability testing comes in. This is how you find these huge design bugs. And once you find them, a lot of times they're not that hard to fix. Now, in the next part of this talk, I'm going to go over some of the actual how to do this stuff. And yeah, so you really don't need much. Like, it's really incredibly simple. You don't need a big usability lab. You don't need microphones and video cameras and two-way mirrors and guys with lab coats. You don't need any of that, right? Chances are most of you have just the tools you need right now on you to get started in this. This is my setup. The participant sits in that chair. They use a computer. We record what they do. We record what they're doing on the screen and what they're saying. If the dev team wants to listen in, we just use screen sharing software for that. They don't even have to be in the same building. Pretty awesome. And I sit in the chair next to them with the clipboard and ask questions occasionally. So in terms of infrastructure and technology, this is really all you need. And it's also pretty cool because you don't even need to know that much. Like, I love stuff like this that I can do without even having to really know that much. Like, I'm sure you can go to Amazon. I'm sure you can buy hundreds of books that tell you hundreds of different ways to do usability testing. And all of them are super complicated, and I'm sure they're very useful to some people. But we've gotten great results just using 2 types of tests. And I'm going to go through them now. The first of these is called the what is it test. This is where you're going to give your user a mock-up, a napkin sketch, have them go to a website, and have them look at it and ask them what it is, what it does. Does anything stand out? And I'm sure nobody here has any sort of website or application that could benefit at all from this. You can tell your friends about this. But I'm sure we've all come across examples of applications that could have perhaps used this. I think this is a chess app. I'm still kind of unsure. I don't know. Anyway, the second type of test. It's called the please do this test. These are my terms, by the way. You won't find anything by Googling them. And as you may suspect, this involves asking somebody to do something, but it's a little bit more complicated than that, right? Because what we're going to do is make a little experiment. And the first step, we need to sort of make a list of things that we'd like to know about our site. For example, a couple weeks ago, I was running one of these studies, and we had made some changes to the credit card pages. I wanted to know if people could still navigate their way around, if they could just still add a credit card. So I put down on my list, can people still navigate around? That's step 1. Step 2 is you write what's called a scenario. A scenario is a task for the user, and it sounds a little bit like a Cucumber feature description, if you ever use Cucumber. My scenario for this question might be, as an existing Honey Badger customer, you have billing information on file, but you know your credit card's about to expire, so you need to go update that. Please log in using this information and update your credit card. And then you give it to the user. You have it printed out, you read it to them, you give it to them, and just see what happens, right? And I'm gonna show you what this looks like. I'm gonna show you some screenshots, and I'm gonna pretend to be the user in this case. In real life, of course, wouldn't be using screenshots, you'd be using your real app. And I'm gonna talk out loud, because that's what I would ask the user to do. That's where you get your real insight from, is from people just saying what they're thinking at the moment. All right, so I'm going to go change the credit card. So signing in, type. Okay, this looks like my home page. Okay, there's a little icon guy over on the right. I'm going to click on that. Okay, profile. Okay, profile. Wait. Okay. Now, okay, there's the billing tab. There we go. Wait a sec. I don't understand this. There's not a credit card. Oh, okay, it's over on the side. And that's about it, right? What we found here is what I like to call a leak. It's a small problem, but when you're dealing with stuff like billing, small problems can have big consequences. Now, this is a pretty simple scenario. If you guys do this, your scenarios will probably be a little bit more involved. You'll have, 3 to 5 of them per user test. Each test will last about 40 minutes. Repeat the tests 3 to 5 times. And you'll find that once you've done this, and once you've gone back and looked at your screencasts, you'll have a really good idea of maybe 4 or 5 areas that could use improvement. And in fact, if you do more than 5 of these tests, I did 7 one time. By the 7th user, I was so bored because I just wanted to point out, it's like, okay, you're just going to have problems here. Just skip that. But anyway. So we've covered the technology, we've covered the methodology, and both of those are really simple. The only complicating factor here is that we're dealing with people, and people are really weird. And your role as the moderator of one of these tests is also kind of weird because you've got to, on the one hand, be be impartial. You've got to be a blank slate, not give them any clues, because if you give them clues, you could mess up your test results. But on the other hand, you have to make sure they actually do the test. You have to make sure they do what you want them to do. Otherwise, what's the point if they go and check their email for an hour? And what you'll find is that people will always be trying to get clues from you, even if they don't realize they're doing it. Because as humans, we have this really weird unconscious desire and ability to continuously give, receive, ask for validation, to make sure that we're sort of like behaving correctly in the context that we are, where we are. And as a moderator, you have to you've got to turn off that side of yourself. You've got to be completely impassive, kind of like a psychotherapist almost. It's strange. And so that's on the one hand. And then on the other hand, people are going to do weird stuff, right? When you write this scenario, you're kind of building a road for them to go down. And usually it's going to be a pretty short, simple, straight road, but people are going to be veering all over the place. People are going to do things you didn't expect. And sometimes they can autocorrect. Sometimes, if you ask them to delete a record that's right in front of them and they wind up on your terms of service page, you can say, so I see you're on the terms of service page. And then you don't say anything. And that awkward silence prompts them to be like, well, okay, I was looking for something, but it's not here, so I'm just going to go back and do the thing you actually asked me to do. But then other times, like, people go off the road, they go off the cliff next to the road, they fall into the Acme Explosives factory at the bottom of the cliff. Like, there's no way they're getting back on track without an intervention from God, which you kind of are. And so then you can just rewind it. You can say, okay, let's just go back. Let's start over. I thought I wrote this in a clear manner, but it seems like it's maybe a bit confusing, so let's just go back. And that's kind of it. I mean, that's a little bit more complicated than the other stuff, but still, it's pretty easy. So now, you guys have pretty much all the knowledge you need to actually go out and do one of these tests. And I hope I've also convinced you that it's worthwhile. Because for a long time, I put this off. For a long time, there's always something more important to do. There's always something more pressing. But now that I've made this a part of what I do and what our company does on a regular basis, I can't think of anything that I can talk to you about that has given us a greater return on investment, right? For a day's worth of work, you get invaluable information about how your app works in the real world, how actual users really use your app. I mean, that's really kind of amazing. And for a process that's so frickin' simple, it's kind of wonderful. If you'd like to learn more about this, I highly recommend you read this book. It's awesome. You can read it in an evening. It costs like $20. It's made for non-usability professionals, so everybody should buy that. And if you want to know more about what I'm up to, check out honeybadger.io/blog. That's where I blog, and I also tweet on the Twitters. That's it. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them later. Just pull me aside and grab me. And you guys can start clapping now. I'm sorry.